Imagine the world of international politics as a grand theatrical production. For decades, one actor has consistently held the lead role: the United States. But lately, the dynamics backstage have been shifting. An ambitious understudy, China, has been diligently practicing its lines, growing tired of waiting in the wings. Xi Jinping now leads this understudy, commanding the world's second-largest economy. Joining this evolving drama is a versatile swing performer, India. Then there is the veteran actor, Russia, now struggling for relevance after widespread isolation. The drama is playing out on the world stage, most notably at a recent economic summit in China. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization gathering showcased a different vision for global order. India's prime minister and Russia's president holding hands, a fleeting but significant gesture. They formed a tight circle with China's president, sharing smiles for the cameras. They traveled in grand limousines, and their social posts echoed affirmations of friendship. To understand the current global realignment, we must first look at each nation's motivations, starting with India, a country caught between two massive centers of gravity. For many years, as India's economy began to industrialize, it actively sought a strong relationship with the United States. Think back to the Howdy Modi event in Houston, Texas, in 2019. It was an unprecedented spectacle, a stadium filled with over 50,000 cheering people. The following year, the favor was returned with a Namaste Trump rally in India that drew even larger crowds. The data reflects this story clearly. India's exports to the United States have shown a consistent upward trend for 3 decades. India became a key member of the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, or Quad, meant as a barricade against Chinese influence in the Indo-Pacific. Both Washington and New Delhi saw Beijing as a common strategic threat. However, after years of building this close relationship, the foundation was shaken by what many in India perceived as a public humiliation. The United States, under an America First policy, began to view its trade relationships through a lens of deficits and reciprocity, and India found itself in the crosshairs. Suddenly, the reliable partner became a target. This abrupt shift in U.S. policy created a sense of betrayal and confusion in New Delhi. The very nation that India had leaned on as its primary ally was now implementing punitive measures that threatened to undo years of progress and undermine India's economic ambitions, leaving it to question the reliability of its partnership. The primary source of this strain was the imposition of staggering tariffs on Indian goods. The U.S. administration implemented a tariff of up to 50% on certain Indian products, one of the highest rates applied to any major trading partner. This wasn't a single, simple tax, but a two-pronged assault on India's economy. The first part was a 25% reciprocal tariff justified by the Trump administration as a tool to correct trade imbalances. For a country like India, whose explosive economic growth relies heavily on its ability to sell what it makes to the world, this was a devastating blow. The very engine of its development plan was being throttled by its largest customer. But this economic pressure would have far-reaching consequences, pushing India toward unexpected alliances and fundamentally reshaping the global balance of power. Industries that are particularly labor-intensive were hit especially hard by the U.S. tariffs: textiles, footwear, apparel. These are the sectors that employ millions of ordinary Indians. Adding insult to injury, the other half of the tariff, an additional 25%, was imposed as a punishment. The reason? India was continuing to purchase oil from Russia. This move was part of a broader U.S. strategy to isolate Russia economically following its invasion of Ukraine. However, from India's perspective, it was being penalized for making a sovereign economic decision based on its own energy needs. This created a bizarre and frustrating situation where punitive measures supposedly aimed at Russia were instead inflicting significant economic pain on India, a strategic partner. The message from Washington seemed contradictory and punitive, further eroding trust. This policy has arguably produced the opposite of its intended effect. On the other side of this emerging bloc is Russia, a nation whose international standing has been profoundly diminished. Vladimir Putin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, which has now dragged on for over 3 years, has made his country a pariah in the Western world. Russia's position on the global stage today is a shadow of its Cold War-era stature. Western nations led by the United States have imposed crippling international sanctions on Russia, more than on any other country in history. They include severe travel restrictions on Russia's political and economic elite, the freezing of billions of dollars in foreign assets, extensive trade blockades on Russian goods, especially energy exports. entire shipments of Russian oil have been impounded at sea. Having blown up his own primary market, Putin desperately needed to find new customers for Russia's most vital export. Russia is the world's second-largest exporter of crude oil, just behind Saudi Arabia. An analysis of recent export data reveals a dramatic shift in its trade patterns. China, India. The sheer volume of oil flowing to these two nations dwarfs exports to any other country. For Russia, the importance of these two buyers cannot be overstated. India has become a crucial customer, propping up the Russian economy with its massive energy purchases, often at discounted prices. China's role is perhaps even more significant. Not only is it a major energy customer, but it is also a supplier of critical technology and components that help fuel Russia's defense industry and its war machine. Amidst this global reshuffling, China sees a golden opportunity, and it is not being shy about its ambitions. From Beijing's perspective, the world order carefully crafted by the United States for nearly a century is beginning to fray. It sees an America that, under the America First doctrine, has become unpredictable, transactional, isolationist. This has created a vacuum on the world stage, a void Xi Jinping believes China is uniquely positioned to fill. China's ambition is not merely to become a regional power, but to transform itself into the central pillar of a new global system. Xi Jinping envisions a world where Beijing, not Washington, sets the rules for trade, finance, and international relations. This vision is being actively promoted through platforms like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. By hosting grand summits and bringing together leaders from across the globe, China is demonstrating its convening power and its ability to lead a coalition of nations skeptical of American dominance. The message being sent from Beijing is clear and deliberate. Just days after the recent SCO summit, China held a massive military parade in Tiananmen Square. A powerful display of its growing hard power and global ambitions. A photograph from that same day captured the leaders of China, Russia, and North Korea standing side by side. A tableau representing a clear challenge to the United States-led security architecture in Asia. Experts argue that China is intentionally highlighting what it perceives as the weakness and inconsistency of the current United States administration. By bullying allies like India with tariffs and failing to force concessions from adversaries like Russia, the United States is seen as less effective, creating an opening for a new leader to emerge. This is more than just posturing, it is a calculated strategy. China is actively working to build an alternative to the Western-led liberal democratic order. The countries involved in its initiatives represent a substantial body of global opinion when measured by population. China's ambition to create a new world order is not just rhetorical, it is being built with steel and concrete through its Belt and Road Initiative. While still a work in progress, the BRI is one of the most ambitious infrastructure projects in human history. The goal is to physically connect economies through a vast network of railroads, oil and gas pipelines, seaports, and digital infrastructure. It's quite literally about building bridges and roads and ports to link China with Asia, Europe, Africa, and beyond. This physical connectivity is designed to place China at the center of a new web of global trade and influence. The Belt and Road Initiative is far more than just an economic project. China has skillfully utilized the BRI as a multifaceted tool of foreign policy to develop deep and lasting ties. These ties are not only economic, they are political, social, and even cultural. Through BRI projects, China provides loans, sends engineers, and builds critical infrastructure that many developing nations desperately need. In doing so, it creates a dynamic of dependency and goodwill, fostering political alignments that serve its long-term strategic interests. It is a form of soft power projection on a truly massive scale, creating a sphere of influence built on tangible development. This strategy allows China to fill the void left by a United States that has appeared to retreat from multilateralism. While the United States has focused more on bilateral trade deals and protectionist measures, China has stepped forward as a champion of global development and connectivity. This contrast is a powerful one. At meetings like the one in Tianjin, China showcases its leadership of a bloc that, by population, represents the single largest regional grouping on the planet. This bloc extends much further, attracting nations that feel disenfranchised by the existing global order. These efforts are a direct challenge to the post-World War II system established by the United States. The BRI, combined with diplomatic platforms like the SCO, provides a structure for an alternative global network with China at its core. This network operates on different principles: state-led development, non-interference in internal affairs, over the democratic values, and free market principles promoted by the West. By creating these parallel structures, China is not just seeking to join the existing order, it is actively working to build a new one, designed to reflect its own power and priorities for the 21st century. It is crucial to understand that messages of unity are distinct from the complex reality of international relations. While the images of Xi, Putin, and Modi smiling together project an aura of a firm anti-United States alliance, the relationship between these three giants is anything but straightforward. Beneath the surface of diplomatic pleasantries lie deep-seated rivalries, historical conflicts, and competing strategic interests. This is not a natural or easy partnership. For instance, the relationship between China and India is fraught with tension, most notably over their disputed border in the Himalayas, where their armies have engaged in deadly clashes in recent years. India is deeply wary of China's expanding influence in South Asia and the Indian Ocean. China's Belt and Road Initiative, which India has pointedly refused to join, Chinese-funded ports in Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, are viewed not as purely commercial ventures, but as potential dual-use naval facilities that could threaten India's security. Similarly, the relationship between Russia and China is not one of equals. Increasingly, Russia is becoming the junior partner. While China provides a vital economic lifeline, it does so on its own terms. Russia is becoming more dependent on Chinese technology, markets, and diplomatic support, a dynamic that subtly shifts the balance of power in Central Asia and beyond. Therefore, what we are witnessing may be less of a formal, cohesive alliance and more of a temporary, tactical alignment of convenience. These three countries are united, for the moment, by a common adversary, and a shared desire to push back against what they perceive as American unilateralism. However, this convergence may prove to be fleeting. The convergence of China, Russia, and India, however temporary or tactical it may be, signals a significant shift in the global landscape. The efforts by the United States to navigate the world through a new, more transactional lens are having the unintended consequence of pushing its adversaries, and even some of its partners, closer together. This emerging bloc, united by a desire to resist American pressure, could create a world that is more fragmented, more competitive, and ultimately more difficult for the United States to maintain its prosperity and influence within. The era of unchallenged American dominance appears to be giving way to a more multipolar and contested reality. For his part, the American president seems to understand what is happening, having already accused China of conspiring with other world leaders against the United States. The awareness of this challenge is present in Washington. The central question, then, is not whether this shift is occurring, but what everyone does next. Will this alignment of convenience between China, India, and Russia solidify into a more durable and formal bloc? Or will their internal rivalries and competing interests cause it to fracture once the external pressure from the United States eases? The answer will shape the contours of international politics for decades to come. The United States faces a critical choice in how it responds. One path is to double down on a confrontational approach, treating this emerging bloc as a monolithic threat and engaging in a new Cold War. This could involve escalating trade wars, expanding sanctions, and strengthening military alliances. However, such a strategy risks further solidifying their cooperation and alienating potential partners like India. Alternatively, the United States could pursue a more nuanced and diplomatic strategy. This would involve recognizing the legitimate grievances of countries like India and repairing frayed alliances through more consistent and predictable policies. It would mean competing with China where necessary, but also cooperating where possible, and using diplomacy to exploit the natural seams and rivalries within the China-Russia-India relationship. Rather than pushing them together, the United States could work to pull them apart by offering a more attractive and stable vision for the global order. The path America chooses will determine not only the future of this new bloc, but also its own place in the world of tomorrow. As we've seen, the theatrical analogy we began with reveals deeper truths about our changing world. The lead actor may still hold the spotlight, but the supporting cast is no longer content to simply follow the script. Whether this leads to a new act in the global drama or a complete rewriting of the play itself remains to be seen. The stage is set, the players are in position, and the world is watching to see how this geopolitical drama unfolds.